Kerry, thank you for your energy and effort. We may have disagreed on some of the details of some of the efforts, but I respect your effort to represent us diplomatically and solve some of these really tough problems around the world. It's a very dangerous world. With regard to the budget, which is primarily what I thought we were supposed to be talking about today, next week Senator Kane and I I'll chair, he's the ranking member of a subcommittee where we'll have some of your staff talk about a few more details of the State Department's budget request. But I want to note for the record today, the State Department, while it's up 25% since 2008, some $12 billion, I recognize it's still 1% of our total spending. I also recognize that the world's a lot more dangerous today. In fact, I think we see the world there is having two real major crises. One is this global security crisis that continues to grow every day. But I think when we look at the State Department budget as well as defense budget, we would be well positioned to consider it in its full perspective. And I know you mentioned this in Munich last week, where you represented the United States very well, I thought. But it seems to me that we have an interlocking two crises. One is this global security crisis on several levels. One is the rise of traditional states, China and Russia, ever more aggressive. We've got these asymmetric threats in terrorists from Indonesia now to Algeria and here at home. We also see nuclear proliferation threats, and honestly, cooperation between North Korea and Iran, even that continues to date. And on top of that, we have the cyber warfare dimension that our military is trying to adapt to, and I know your organization is trying to adapt to. And what we don't talk a lot about is the growing arms race in space. So, I mean, this is a very complicated world right now. Interlocked with that, though, is our own debt crisis. Our own intransigence here threatens our ability to fund the needs that we have. And I'm coming to a specific question. Before I get to that about Europe, I'd like to just ask you a quick question about Iran. Originally, we were told the number that they would be given over a period of time was somewhere between $100 and $150 billion. Then the administration came back and said, well, we think it's closer to 50 in terms of what they can get. There's some balance sheet issues that they have access to, but cash is about 50. We've heard Iranian officials talk recently about it could be as in excess of 100. Do we have an update on what that number is quickly?
It's below the 50.
And how do we have any intelligence how they're using it to date?
We can talk about that in a classified session.
Thank you. The next question is, General Breedlove in Munich just last week described the refugee situation, the migrant situation in Europe as being, the refugees being weaponized. And I know you were there, and I know you commented on that. I'd love to get your comments, though, relative to defense spending in Europe is well under 2%. I think for a generation, Europe has looked to the United States to be the big brother, and now we see Putin seeing that underspending in their military. Our spending right now is about 3% of our GDP. It's about 100 basis points less than our 30-year average, or in today's terms, about $200 billion. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to spend $200 billion more, but I'd like to know what the State Department and your strategy is, and administration strategy is, to deal with Putin in light of these growing dangers from this immigration issue in Europe, particularly in the very susceptible states of Eastern Europe that used to be satellites of the Soviet Union, all the way up through the Baltics. But if you come starting in Greece and go up the refugee pipeline, these are very vulnerable states right now. And what's our strategy to offset Putin and to deal with the growing threat to these very fragile governments?
Our strategy is to support them to a much greater degree. We've got the NATO assurance program that's in place. We've put very significant effort into larger numbers of rotating training and troops and equipment in the region. In addition, as I mentioned in my opening statement, we've taken, I think our expenditure last year was about 700 some million or something. We're taking it up to 3.4, 3.5 billion in assistance to the frontline states, and in order to make it very, very clear that we're there, and to support Ukraine. In addition to that, we've, I forget, it's a very significant amount that has also gone in. It's about $1.6 billion, I think it is. So we are making it very clear that we're there to help. Now, the weaponization issue is a serious one. I think that we've seen the dial get turned up and turned down. I might add, not only by Russia. And so, again, in classified session, I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit. But I think that it is imperative for us, as I said earlier, to be prepared to do more with respect to helping Europe to be able to withstand this onslaught. This is, you really can't overstate the impact politically of the potential of another million refugees.
Do you think Europe can take another million?
No, I think it is not doable, and I think we have to, I think that would have profoundly negative, dramatic.
I know you also heard people in Munich just last week, talk about the growing refugee crisis from the sub-Saharan area as well, and the crisis in Egypt right now, and that's
Well, 50% of the people going in are not from Syria. Mm-hmm. They're coming from Bangladesh, they're coming from Pakistan, Afghanistan, they're coming from Africa. So it's a major challenge to the very nature of the European Union.
Well, some of us visited Serbia, and about 60% coming through that pipeline are male, young male, under 35, and only about 17% women, and the balance, 20% or so, were children. And a good number of those were from Afghanistan, coming
Correct.
through the Greece and Macedonia pipeline.
Correct.
Let me ask one other quick question. I'm about out of time, but I'd like to go back to North Korea. Director of National Intelligence Clapper just this year commented that, and I'll quote this, Pyongyang's export of ballistic missiles and associated materials to several countries, including Iran and Syria, and its assistance to Syrians' construction of a nuclear reactor illustrate North Korea's willingness to proliferate dangerous technologies. We know in 2006, 2009, 2013, that Iranian officials reportedly participated and were there during those nuclear tests. Do you have anything you can tell us about what the State Department is doing and the administration is doing to monitor that cooperation and any potential violations of the JCPOA in terms of nuclear proliferation between those two countries?
Yeah, at this point in time, we do not assess that there is a violation, but we have in place restrictions under the UN Security Council resolutions to be able to act if there are. Director Clapper is on target, and he's accurate, and we agree with that assessment, and we're working very closely to address that. I think we're on the verge of having an agreement, hopefully, with China. In fact, I'm meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister this afternoon. We are very hopeful that we know we've made progress in the negotiation in New York in coming up with a substantial and improved UN Security Council resolution with respect to what we would do, what we will do as a result of these activities. So we're taking both national steps and multilateral steps. We have entered the conversations with South Korea on the THAAD missile deployment, THAAD defensive system deployment. And, you know, we obviously have other options available to us, but, you know, this does not interfere with the JCPOA. It's separate from it, but we are nevertheless going to take these actions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.